Hey everyone, you're watching Left Hand Reviews, and this is episode 31, and I decided today to go back to what the Geek List was originally to be about, and that was to take a look at games that came out prior to this big boon of video reviews. And you may remember some of my more popular videos of Tikal and Goa. And recently I've been getting the opportunity to review a lot of newer games and game crafter games from new designers, which has been a lot of fun, but you know, we gotta always go back to the roots. And so today we're gonna take a look at Caylus. Caylus is not a particularly old game. It was released in 2005 by William Attia. And it's gone through a couple different editions. I think there's a new edition out now. There's a special edition. This is just the classic Rio Grande Games edition. The game is a very strong Euro. It's a worker placement which revolves around medieval city building. And it takes about, if everyone knows what they're doing, you could probably go through a game in about 2 hours. Sometimes it may take a little bit longer. The number of players is from 2 to 5, though it is recommended to probably stay about 4. With more than that, it can drag a little bit. But so that aside, we're going to take a look at the components that come in Caylus. I'm going to explain how to play the game, and then I will tell you my thoughts and views on Caylus. The standard edition of Caylus is going to come in a regular-sized game box with a very perturbed-looking king on the front. So we'll open it up here. First thing you're going to see is the rule book. Rule book is going to be in full color. It's pretty easy to figure out how the game works, and it's kind of looks like it's got French here in the back. You flip it over and there's a French rule book, so that's kind of interesting. You have a front and back English player aid, so if you already know how to play the game or are going to teach the game, you can go in here and read the short rules and refresh yourself, and that makes it a little bit easier than going through the whole rule book, so that's at least nice. You have a quad fold rulebook, game board rather here. You're going to have game pieces for all the different players. You're going to have some money here. A couple different denominations, 5s and 1s. You have all your building tiles here, because in this game you're going to be building various buildings along a road in a city. And of course we have all of our various Euro cubes. You can't have a Euro game without lots and lots of teeny tiny cubes. These cubes represent basically various resources in the game, and like pink, I believe, is food. I don't know, maybe you're supposed to pretend they're pigs or something, pork, I don't know. But anyway, let's set up a game. I'll show you how it plays. Here's the basic setup for a 3-player game of Caylus. Let me just go over what you see here, because there is a little bit going on. Here we have all of our resource cubes organized in this nice little Plano box. Basically, it is food, wood, stone, cloth, and gold. You're going to have each of the various types of buildings in the game, and these are basically all different buildings in here. Except for these green ones, these are all going to be the same. I'll explain what all those buildings are in a minute. Okay, we have our bank here with our deniers. Each player is going to start with a whole bunch of little houses that they're going to use to mark various things in the game. They have their workers. Each player is going to start with 2 food and 1 wood. And depending on the player order, will determine how many deniers you start with. As for the board here, at the top you're going to have the castle, which players are going to be trying to build. And this is going to correspond with scoring, triggering of scoring throughout the game. You have your victory point track around the edge. You have your turn order track right here. The King's Favor table here is on the right. That is going to correspond with players that build in the castle. Whoever builds essentially the most in the castle will acquire King's Favor. Then we have our various buildings here that are built along a road. You can see that some of these spaces already have buildings in them. These are permanent buildings. You have the bridge here, which is going to come into play during passing. Then you have these pink buildings, which are the big starting buildings, and they are just placed randomly onto the board here. You have 2 more fixed buildings here, and then all these empty spaces, another fixed building, and then more empty spaces as you go down. And these empty spaces are where players are going to be using their workers to build new buildings. Now, as you can imagine, as a worker placement game, you're going to be using your workers here and placing them on the buildings. And after all workers have been placed, you are then going to start with the first building here and work your way down, activating each building as you go, and the players that are on said buildings are going to receive the action associated with that building. In addition, you're going to have the bailiff here and the provost, which are going to be moving down the road as well. Essentially, the bailiff is constantly going to be moving forward. When the bailiff crosses certain spaces on the board, it may trigger scoring, and when the bailiff gets all the way down here to this spot here, it is going to trigger the end of the game. Now, we also here have the provost. The provost is going to be moving along with the bailiff as well, but he's going to determine which buildings are going to activate. Buildings that the provost is sitting on and before will activate, whereas buildings after the provost will not activate. Alright, so I guess the best thing to do in Caylus is for us to just go through a mock turn. Each turn is going to be comprised of 7 different phases completed in order. And we'll go through all those, and I can explain what all the buildings are and how scoring works. And by that point, you should have a really good idea of how to play Caylus. In Phase 1, each player is going to collect income. The base income is going to be 2 deniers from the stock to each player. And there are some buildings that, if a player has built during the game, will afford them additional deniers during this income collection phase. Phase 2 is really the meat of the game. That is the placing of your workers. Now, one thing that's a little bit unique in Caylus is that placing your workers is not free. It's going to cost you money. The amount of money that it's going to cost you is equal to the lowest denier value that is visible here on the bridge. So what you're going to do is a player is going to take their action pawn here, or their worker, and place it on the building corresponding to the action they want to take. Then the next player in turn order will go. In this case, it's red. So maybe they may place theirs here. Then green may place theirs here. And it's going to keep going over and over. Now, because the lowest value on the track is 1, each time a player places one of their workers, they're going to have to pay the bank 1 denier. And you can see you don't start with very many, so it is extremely critical to be frugal in this game and manage your money, because there's a lot of situations where you're going to need 1 more denier, or you placed your worker in a place that requires a denier, but you spent them all placing workers, so now you can't complete that actions, and it totally throws your whole turn out of whack. So, in short, manage your money very, very carefully. Now, so as players are placing their workers, you also have to keep in mind where that provost is going to be. Because if I place one of my workers here, and the provost has not gotten to that point, that's not going to activate. So, in other words, not only have I wasted one of my workers, but I've wasted the money to place him there in the first place. Alright, so, as players decide to stop placing their workers because they've run out of money, or they're trying to conserve money, or for whatever reason, they're going to pass. When a player passes, they're going to take their pawn here on the bridge, or the little marker, and put it on the lowest number space. The person that passes first is going to collect 1 denier from the bank, just kind of as a bonus. Now, as you can see, now the smallest number is 2. So players that continue placing pawns, each pawn that they place is going to cost 2. So it's red's turn. If red wants to keep going and place one here, it's going to cost him 2 deniers instead of just 1. And again, maybe it's green's turn now. Green will pass. Now it's red's turn again, and 3 is just too rich for them, so they'll pass as well. So that's going to end the worker placement phase. Phase 3 is going to be the activation of buildings. Buildings are going to activate in order that they are on the road, and that is extremely, extremely critical, because there may be certain things that you want to do here, and you're saying, well, I'm going to get some money from this one, so I can spend it on this one. Well, no, because this one's going to happen first. So plan again, plan accordingly. So let me go over what each of the buildings does. The first one here is the gate. The reason that you would place on the gate is now you may place take this worker and place them on any other unoccupied building on the board for free. If you've played Lords of Waterdeep, think Waterdeep Harbor. The second place here is the trading post. At the trading post, you're simply going to collect 3 deniers. Next, we have the Merchant's Guild. The person that places on the Merchant's Guild gets to move the Provost forward or backwards up to 3 spaces. Now, remember how I said where the Provost is determines what buildings activate. So that could be a good screwage space, or if you were up here, a good space to hopefully allow buildings that originally were not going to activate, or rather to deactivate buildings that probably were going to activate. So again, if I went here, I could move the Provost back 2 spaces. So then, now all these forward wouldn't work. Or in this case, if I had in fact put a worker here, I can move him forward 3 spaces. So now this place will in fact activate, where originally it was not. We have the jousting field. A player can give a cloth and a denier back to the stock and gain a royal favor. That's going to allow them to move up here on the royal favor track. We'll get into that later. Next, we have the stables. You have 3 spaces on the stables. Each player, so up to 3 players can play here, and each one is going to start by placing on the lowest number and so on. And this is going to be how you adjust the turn order track. Next, we have the inn. At the inn, you're first going to put your pawn here. When it comes to the inn, you're just going to move it over here to the right. If there's already a guy here, so let's say I did that on this turn, it's just going to bump him off. Now, the benefit of being in the inn is that every pawn that you place is always going to cost you only 1 denier. So later in the game, if you're here and people pass, and it's still Red's turn, they can keep placing for only 1 denier instead of 3. So that's a really nice spot to be in. Alright, next we have the bridge. And you're going to see the Provost symbol here that looks exactly the same as it did here at the Merchant's Guild. That's because each player now has the opportunity to move the Provost. And how do they move the Provost? Well, like any red-blooded politician, they can be bribed. Each player is going to have the opportunity, starting in passing order, so blue, green, and then red, to pay 1 denier per space to move the Provost forward or backward up to 3 spaces. So blue might say, well, I don't want one of these guys to move the Provost back behind my pawn here and deactivate this building, so blue may pay a couple deniers, say 3 deniers to the stock, move him up 3. 1, 2, 3. Now it makes it harder for them to move him back, but these 2 players may conspire against me and each pay 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and end up moving him back there. So now, shoot, now I'm out of luck. It's really important when you're placing your pawns is to keep an eye on the Merchant's Guild here and on the bridge here, because there's always players out there that are not going to want your buildings to activate. Now here we have the mine. This is going to allow you to collect 1 stone. The forest here allows you to collect 1 wood or 1 food, designated by the slash here. Then here you're able to collect either 1 food or 1 cloth, 1 wood here. Here you can trade in any 1 good and collect 4 deniers. And then in here, this building yard allows you to build a orange building. In order to build a building, assuming that you've gone on this space, you can basically look through all of the orange buildings here and pick one, say this one, and you have to be able to pay the cost that's here on the top left in cubes. In this case, this one will cost 1 wood and 1 food. I'm going to place on the next available space, pay that from my stock into the supply, and then take one of my little houses and put it on the building there. I'm also going to immediately score the number of prestige points that's listed in the top right corner, so in this case 2. Now what that means is in future rounds in the game, when players place onto my owned buildings, I'm immediately going to score 1 prestige point for that. In addition, there's also some buildings that have a parentheses underneath their main benefit, and that means in addition to scoring the prestige point, the owner of the building is also going to get to select a lesser action, or basically gets a bonus. So the player that places here would get 2 wood and a food, and the owner would get to select a wood or a food for themselves. In this space here, you're allowed to pay 2 denier for any 1 goods cube. Here's another one of the orange or brown, I guess, building yards. And then again here, nobody would have placed here during this turn because this was just placed, but if you were to place here, you'd get either 2 food or 1 cloth. And all these buildings are going to be relatively similar. They're going to give you various benefits. This one allows you to pay, 1 denier for 1 cube or 2 denier for 2 cubes. You can see there's various buildings that are going to do different things. Now the green buildings here are residential buildings. If you build a residential building, it's going to give you the prestige points. You have to pay the cost, of course, and you see a 1 denier symbol there. Now that does not mean that you place a worker on here and you get 1 denier. What that means is that when that is built and you have your house on it, meaning you built it and you own it, during the income collection phase, you're going to collect 1 additional denier per residential building that you have. Now we also here have the blue prestige buildings. These ones are worth big mondo points. In order to build a blue prestige building, it is basically built on top of or places a green residential building. So in order to buy one of these later in the game, you have to at least have 1 residential building for it to replace. And in this particular case, while most of these are just going to give you points, this one here is also going to contribute another 2 deniers to your income every turn. This one here gives you a royal favor, as you can see by the fleur-de-lis symbol. And there's various other ones here. Most of these are worth a lot of points and can be big swings towards the end of the game. 14 points, for example. Now, in order to build these prestige buildings and to build the green and the gray buildings here, you can't just build them at these yards here because these only correspond to this color. Now, there's going to be other ones in here that are going to allow you to build those other colors. For example, this is going to allow you to build stone buildings. And this one's going to allow you to build those residential buildings. And in the stone ones here, see, this one's going to allow you to place that prestige building over top of that green residential building. So all these are going to be interconnected. They're almost like various levels that you have to build up as you go. Now after the activation of all the buildings on the track here, or on the road rather, you're going to then build at the castle. So in phase 6, the building of the castle, each player is going to have the opportunity to contribute batches in order to build the parts of the castle. The first section here is the dungeon. Then after the dungeon's built, you're going to move on to building the walls, and then finally the towers. The way that you know which section you're going to be building is depends on where the bailiff is. When the bailiff here moves onto or past the tower space here, or the dungeon space, you're immediately going to do a scoring round, and then all building in the castle is going to move now to the walls. And again, when that bailiff moves onto or past the wall space, another scoring round is going to happen, and you're going to move from building from on the walls to then building in the tower. Now, so it's possible that these don't fully fill up before you move on to the next one. Now, in a situation where it does fill up and more players have the opportunity to contribute more batches to the castle, then you'll automatically move on to the next one. A batch consists of 3 different cubes, as you can see here. One of those 3 has to be a food. For each one you contribute, you're going to take one of your houses and put it onto an appropriate space in the castle. For the dungeon area, each one that you place is going to get you 5 points. In the walls, each one will give you 4 points, and in the towers, each one that you place will give you 3 points. The person that has placed the most of their houses, in other words, contributed most to the building of the castle, in this turn, gets a royal favor. So, in other words, if blue put 1 here, and these 2 could not, then I've placed the most. Or if each player ended up placing 1, ties are broken by the player that was in there first. So blue, again, would have placed the most, so they get a royal favor. If a player places here, but they choose not to or cannot contribute any batches to the castle, then they're going to lose 2 victory points. What is that royal favor for? Well, the royal favor is used here on the royal favor track. A player is going to take their disc here, that corresponds to which level of the track they want to advance on, and advance. The first one here is going to give you victory points. This gives you deniers. This will give you resources, and this is going to allow you to have some bonus builds. So if I chose to advance on the top one here, I'd move my piece there, and I immediately get 1 point. Later in the game, if I did this again, I could choose to move up again, and then I get 2 points. It's important to note that these first two rows here are available at the beginning of the game. Once the scoring of the dungeon happens, as you can see here, then these spaces are going to open up, and finally after the walls score, then the final spots are going to open up. It's also important to note that you can only advance on each level of the track once per turn. So in that case, if you have multiple royal favors that you have to use at once, you can only advance once on each level. So in other words, the most royal favors that you can actually utilize on one turn is 4, because you move each one 4. So these are all pretty self-explanatory. The only one that might not be totally self-explanatory is the bottom here. The first one's not going to get you anything. The second is going to allow you to immediately build a orange building, and it's going to cost you 1 fewer wood. And similarly here, build a gray building, 1 fewer stone, build a residence for 1 fewer denier, and here allows you to do an immediate upgrade from a residential building to one of those prestige buildings that we talked about earlier. In phase 7, that's basically the end phase of the turn, the cleanup phase, and possible scoring. What you're going to do is move the bailiff. The amount that you move the bailiff is dependent on where the provost is. In this situation where the provost is behind the bailiff, you're going to move the bailiff up 1 space and the provost joins him. If there was a situation where the provost happened to be ahead of the bailiff, you're going to move the bailiff 2 spaces and send the provost to join him. This is going to constantly be moving the game forward. It's almost like a timing mechanism, because every time that bailiff here moves onto or past one of the scoring spaces, you're immediately going to score. And finally, when you get past this last space here, or onto, that's going to start the final scoring. Now, also in this phase 7, you're also going to score if necessary. And again, like I just said, if you're on or past one of the scoring spaces, you're going to score. Or if you happen to fill up a particular section here on the castle, say before you got to this space, and this was full, then you would score there automatically. Scoring is relatively simple. All you're going to do is count the number of houses that each player has in the section of the castle that is scoring, and just apply the rules here that are very clearly visible on the board. So in the dungeon section of the castle, if you have 0 houses in the dungeon section, you're going to lose 2 points. If you have at least 2 in the castle, you're going to gain a royal favor. And again, that allows you to advance up the track. Now, later in the game, when you're scoring the walls, if you have 0 in the castle, you're going to lose 3 points. If you have at least 2 houses, you'll get a royal favor. If you have at least 3 houses, you'll get 2 royal favors. And if you have at least 5 houses, you'll get 3 royal favors. And remember, that's going to the rule is going to come into play in which you can only move each of the 4 tracks, only 1 space per turn. And then finally, at the final scoring, you are going to score the towers. No houses in the towers, you're going to lose 4 points. And with 2, 4, and 6 houses, you're going to get 1, 2, or 3 royal favors, respectively. After the scoring of the towers section here, the game is immediately going to come to an end, and players will tally up their points. There is a little bit of endgame scoring here, where you can cash in deniers, 4-to-1 ratio, cubes, 3-to-1, and gold. Each gold is worth 3 victory points. You're going to track that around the victory point track around the edge of the board, and whoever has the most prestige will win the game. Caylus is an excellent worker placement euro. A lot of people really call it a heavyweight euro. I have to respectfully disagree with that. I think it is definitely a medium, maybe a medium heavy, but it's not much more than that. I can think of a lot of games that are a lot more heavier than Caylus. You know, the one that pops off the top of my head right now is Dominant Species. I think that's a lot heavier compared to Caylus. So don't let a lot of those people that say this is a really heavyweight think euro. It's really not that bad. It's worker placement. You place your workers and you just do what is on each of the tiles. Now there is a lot of stuff going on, but it really just gets boiled down to exchanging resources. So it's really not so bad. Hopefully this video will give you a good idea how to play, so you can just pick up the game, take a look at those quick rules, and get right to it. There's a few things in the game that I didn't explain, or I may have left out, little rules here and there, but what I've gone over is probably 90% of everything you need to know to get into this. One nice thing about Caylus as well is there's a fantastic online implementation on BoardGameArena.com. So definitely check that out. I play this there a fair amount with buddies that don't live in the area, so it's a lot of fun to be able to play some of these heavier games online. Overall, like I said, I really enjoy Caylus, but it can be a little thinky as far as analysis paralysis is concerned, because you know, this game forces you to think ahead. It's not really a tactical game so much from you know, placement to placement. You have to always be thinking ahead, and the big concern in this game is managing of those deniers that you have, because it's devastating when you don't have enough deniers in order to place your workers. And there's not a heck of a lot of Euros out there that I can think of off the top of my head that force you to pay money or some sort of resource in order to place workers. So, I mean, that's a huge reason why I like this game, is because you have to manage your money extremely carefully. You also have to be cognizant of the fact that the buildings are going to activate in order as you move down the road. And so you have to remember, you know, you can't do things that require resources that you're going to collect after the fact. So again, the order of activation of the buildings is really important, as well as having that money. I also like that there is a fair amount of player interactiveness in this game, because of the fact that you can move that Provost around and essentially screw over your opponents. You know, there's always a lot of table talk when we play this game, and I really enjoy that aspect of it. So overall, Caylus, I really, really like. There's not really a heck of a lot negative I can say about it. I mean, what you see is what you get. You know, it's a good, medium-heavy Euro. It's going to take you 2 hours to play through once everyone knows what they're doing and you don't have anybody that's dying of analysis paralysis. There's a lot of ways to earn points, which is really nice. You're going to get points from the buildings. You're going to get points from building the castle. And you get points when people use your buildings and so on and so forth. So I like that aspect of it. The components in this edition, I can't speak to the new edition, although I'm sure it's very similar. The components are very, very nice. You get a ton of wood pieces and bits. The coins rather, and the building tiles are nice thick cardboard. So there's really nothing to complain about there. The art style on it is not really, you know, anything to write home about. You know, I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's okay. Now, the special edition, which I unfortunately don't have, is really cool. So you should definitely take a look at that. Look at some of the pictures online. But overall, Caylus, great game, great Euro. It's definitely one that I think people that enjoy the meatier Euros should sink their teeth into. It's a good game to have in your collection. And now with the new edition, it's fairly easy to come across. So, Caylus, make sure you play it at your next meetup or pick up a copy. So, thanks for watching.